Thank you so much. We are now recording, and now I'm going to introduce our chair, Mr. Glenn Fuston.
Thanks, Christina. Good morning, everybody. Hope everybody is ready for another great and productive meeting. I know there's been a lot of work that's been happening behind the scenes, and we'll be getting an update on that in just a moment. Going through our agenda, we'll look at the work groups and the announcements, the makeup of them. We'll talk about the definitions and the core values work group, what their report out is, and then talk about some of the agency reports to the commission in late March. Our goal today, it's going to be a very productive meeting, action-packed, I'm sure. I also wanted to let everybody know that today is my second to last day with the state. I have given my resignation to the governor, and it's been an honor to work for him and work with all of you on this commission. And I'm very excited to see where this commission goes. Unfortunately, I will not be the chair moving forward. While they look for a replacement for me, Yeshim Karaman, who I believe is on the line, will be providing guidance for our office. So you can certainly reach out to Yeshim. And Jessica Wheeler, I'm happy to report, will take over the acting chair position in my absence. So again, I wanted to thank you all for all the support you provided me in this commission, but also just in my career here with the state. So with that, we'll move through the agenda. I think that the first thing is Kelly is going to do some introductions for us.
Thank you, Glenn. So I am able to see through everyone's name who is here. So I've marked down everyone, but if you are here as a designee for someone, if you could introduce yourself for us or type in the chat, that would be very helpful for me. And then I will continue to look at this, my attendance sheet throughout the meeting. So I'm capturing everyone who is here in terms of the appointed commission members.
Great. Thanks, Kelly. The next thing, which I always forget to do when I chair these things, is the approval of minutes. I'm so proud of myself that yesterday and then today I've remembered on my last two commission meetings. So is there a motion to approve the January meeting minutes?
I have just a comment on one addition to the amendments. Minutes. Thanks, Glenn. In the part on the work groups, the definitions and strategy work group is not in that. I mean, there's a small mention of it in the earlier discussion part, but there's no, when it says lists out the work groups, that is not among them.
Okay. We can definitely look into that.
In addition to the.
Any other comments before a motion? So is there a motion to approve the minutes with the addition that Claudia mentioned?
So moved. This is Carol.
Thank you, Secretary Beatty. Any discussion on that? Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. And rather than doing the whole everybody that wants to vote aye, is there anybody opposed to this motion? Nope. Then the meeting minutes for January are approved with the addition of adding in the definitions section. Definition and core values, sorry. So the next thing, turn it over to Kelly for work group announcements and updates.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for everyone for submitting through that Google form what work groups you'd like to serve on. If any, we got a ton of responses, which is really great and exciting to start being able to do that work and putting these groups together. And thank you to everyone who said that they would like to be a chair or a co-chair of the work groups. Here is the breakdown of who our chairs are. And as you can see that the ACE Aware group is our only group that is vacant. So if anyone is interested in chairing or co-chairing that work group, please reach out to myself and or Christina so we can get you all set up with that. You will see here that the definition and core values work group is not listed. Christina, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think we're going to have a formal chair or co-chair for that group because it's kind of one of the work groups that we don't think will be spanning the course of the entire commission. But if that's something to discuss, we can go ahead and discuss that as well. But I just wanted to let everyone know that these are our chairs for your work groups. I have reached out to all of them, and so if you haven't heard from your chair yet, you will soon, to start setting up those meetings. And those work groups will, of course, be meeting on a more regular basis compared to these monthly at-large commission meetings. Okay, and then just to go over some roles and expectations for our chairs and co-chairs. If I have already reached out to you, this should be relatively familiar, but just so everyone, including just participants on the work groups, are clear. Here are some of the roles and expectations for our chairs. So obviously you're going to communicate with your work group members, and your work group chairs and co-chairs will be the ones scheduling and leading your work group meetings. So you will not be receiving emails from me about scheduling those meetings. That will come from your chair and co-chairs. You'll serve as the liaison between the work group members, the commission, and the commission staff. And you will submit written reports of your work group progress 1 week prior to the monthly commission meeting. So the same time I send out that reminder email about our meetings, I will ask for chairs and co-chairs to send me a written summary of work group progress. So we have that ready for a report out at the at-large commission meetings, which brings us to our last bullet here. And so we will ask that our chairs and co-chairs report out at our monthly meetings just a summary of the work group progress, so you can take that written report and just give us the high level details. And that will also serve as an opportunity to provide the commission with any asks or questions, get any feedback on things like that. And that will be a good time for some overview work group discussion and report out. And does anyone have any questions? I see Christina, Bethel, you raised your hand. Oops, you're on mute.
Okay, great. So I just wanted to say that the work group on definitions and principles, in my work with California, both on the roadmap to resilience with Nadine Burke-Harris, as well as on the roadmap recommendations for governor expenditures around this space, that was a group that went on forever and ever, because as new people came in, as we got input from the field, as we went through the other processes, as other work groups started having conversations, maybe for the first time, they really thought about those definitions and they evolved. And I've shared all that with Claudia, so she has it. But it was really down to the wire of actually finalizing and of getting agreement on recommendations that we had to make some tweaks to the definitions for people to even sign on. And so I just wanted to suggest the possibility that that is a living group, although it may have lulls for sure, that it stays alive, and that as you engage the community and all the other activities we're doing, people will look at them, they will have input, and it is an evolving field. Even since our work, getting healing centered in there was a big deal because it wasn't even a word back then. So I just want to suggest that it not be not made a formal group, even though it may look different in terms of the periodicity of meetings, and that it's more responsive to the ongoing input that's going to be received, to make sure any new people in the other groups really internalize it and agree to it, because it will impact their work, those definitions. So that's just a suggestion. I will unraise my hand. Oh, I'm trying to.
Claudia has her hand up.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. Christina, I think that's exactly what needs to happen. It's a key foundational to the entire work that we're doing.
Any other comments?
I mean, including measures, right? Like if you're going to operationalize measures, it all starts with the definition and stuff. Yeah.
Great. I would agree. So Kelly, we can make that change, I think. And then Kelly, do you have any other things that you wanted to go over?
Nope, that's all for work groups unless anyone has any more questions.
So we'll go ahead and make that change so that that'll stand, be a standing group, and we can go from there. Is that I'm getting a lot of beeps, but I don't think that anybody has their hands up. So next, we're going to get a report out from that group, and Christina's going to give us an overview.
Thanks, Glenn. So the Definitions and Core Value Work Group had its first meeting last week and really talked about and did a review of what we heard at the last commission meeting about ideas around identifying core values and that definitions need to be defined for the whole state, and then also what are those definitions. There's some general consensus around adopting SAMHSA's existing 6 principles to trauma-informed approaches, and lots of reasons that it's something that is widely used and recognized and is a good starting point, but also for the future, if we are in alignment with SAMHSA, that could also provide access to additional federal funding and opportunities if we are in alignment. So just as a recap, the 6 core principles are safety, trustworthiness and transparency, peer support, collaboration and mutuality, empowerment and choice. And I will note for the last one, cultural, historical, and gender, SAMHSA uses the word issues. We had discussion as a commission and as a work group to change that language and possibly have it be considerations, because the connotation of issues is that there's something wrong with having different cultural, historical, and gender considerations. And so using more positive language around that it's a consideration or something to be mindful of, as opposed to an issue, a problem that needs to be fixed or remedied. So there was some consideration for that language. Also recognizing that SAMHSA does also have what they call the 4 R's framework. So again, these are kind of principles, assumptions, considerations, but those 4 R's are realize the widespread impact, recognize signs and symptoms, respond, and resist re-traumatization. So for kind of core values is using the SAMHSA framework as a foundation, and that the Definitions and Core Value Work Group and the Commission will look to see if there's language that needs to be amended or that needs to be added to fit the needs of this group, but really using SAMHSA as a basis. Also in the work group's work, talking about looking at how other states who have gone through this process, what kind of amendments and language changes did they use in using, most of them use SAMHSA as a base, but again, looking to other states as examples. I believe, and I don't remember which state, but another state added an additional R, and I'm not recalling it. So I think we have the flexibility to, use this as a jumping off point and make this as unique and responsive to Maryland's needs as possible. So that's the continuing work. That's some continuing work that the work group will work on and present, present that back. So one of the tasks that the work group is doing that statewide scan of looking at how other states are defining terms and identifying core values and principles and assumptions as a basis, and then this group would be tweaking that language. I'm just going to take a pause for a moment because I do see there is some stuff in the chat. So Jessica shares, hoping that we can collectively research ways for our state to define these terms, and that we also have existing resources. So yes, that is what the work group is looking at. We have created, it's not very pretty yet, but it's a functional spreadsheet where we have lists of terms and core principles, and we're going to be inputting information from, how other states define that. And we also have resources that we will be building, existing resources that we will be building off of it. And also I see Kay Connor shared resilience and relationships are considerations for some additional R's. I know in our conversation, both as a large group, but then also in the core values and definitions work group, there was discussion about resilience in that and building relationships and how do we define that and what that looks like. So I think that was everything in the chat. And now I see Elizabeth has her hand raised.
Yeah, on the principles, I know they've moved sometimes with SAMHSA, but what we usually use are that I see missing on those from SAMHSA are under peer support. We usually have, or in our consultation, mutual self-help. And then under empowerment, I've always seen it with voice, empowerment, voice, and choice. So I know SAMHSA keeps moving some of those definitions sometimes, but just wanted to see if we could look at where they are currently on those additional words.
Great, thanks so much, Elizabeth. And so we have members of the work group that are here on the commission, and also Kelly is taking notes. So we will be sure to bring that back to the work group for additional discussion. So also the group also talked about definitions. We know definitions are important. That guides the work when we're talking about measures and what is our collective understanding. So this is just a short list of the initial brainstorm from the work group about terms that need to be defined. Again, similar to core values, we're going to be looking at what are existing definitions, whether through SAMHSA, whether through other states, through laws and regulations and policies, and do that scan to see what is currently in existence, and then how do we need to adopt or amend that language to meet the needs of Maryland. So this is just, again, an initial response. We did also want to open it up to the commission just as a gut check to see if there's something that you think is missing that we need to ensure is defined. And Elizabeth, I see your hand up. I don't know if that's new or if that is left over from before. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. So for our commissioners, is there any kind of initial response to a term that is not up here that you think is important to be defined? And I'm not seeing any hands, which is fine, but also if you have other ideas, feel free to put those in the chat. So again, I see Matilda.
So just wanted to clarify, when we speak of historical trauma, are we including the intergenerational transmission of trauma in that? And then also wanted to clarify secondary trauma. Are we referring to vicarious trauma or just any type of secondary stress?
So we haven't decided on final definitions yet. I think that is all in the consideration and discussion. The work group, we covered a lot in our first meeting, but the first was just identifying terms. And so now we're going through the process of what are those examples? What do we mean? For your example, what do we mean when we talk about historical, cultural, and racial trauma? And so I think, to your point, we're considering all of those different definitions and perspectives, and the group will be kind of narrowing it down and solidifying what those definitions are. Claudia.
Yeah, I was on that first meeting, and this was really a quick brainstorming. It was not an extensive, and I think it's really important that all of the commission members and members of different work groups weigh in on terms that need to be defined, especially those working on work groups. If you're thinking about terms and it should be defined, we should get it into this, these initial definitions, and then we can, as Christina mentioned, really move ahead from there, because this is going to be a living document.
Thank you, Claudia. And also just uplifting in the chat, including intergenerational transmission as a definition, and also Andrew Bell put in connections to substance use disorders and trauma, recognizing that might be out of the scope, but that could be a contributing factor. And so including some definitions around that for consideration. Also CK, when considering childhood traumatic stress, family level trauma, including parent and caregiver experience trauma, and traumatic events and experiences that happen over the course of the lifespan. So I think this is also something that we talked about in the work group. There is a lot of focus on adverse childhood experiences and childhood adversity, but we do want to recognize that this commission is for the whole lifespan, and that adversities happen throughout everyone's life, and trauma happens throughout everyone's life, and not just during childhood. And so I think as a work group, we wanted to make sure that yes, adverse childhood experiences are one category of experiences, but they are not the sole. They're not the only experiences. So there was that discussion during the work group. I see Christina.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment really quickly that I totally agree with what you just said. I also want to just point to the science that's really clear that what happens early life is different in terms of brain development and what that means. So having an experience at different points in life makes a big difference in terms of what kind of approaches might be taken and so on and so forth. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but just recognizing the, life course science around, a trauma when you're an adult can really land differently if you didn't have ACEs as a child versus if you did. And that we just keep that in mind. And of course, with measurement, we can talk about how to get the information needed to see where, people need attention or not.
Thank you, Christina. I also just want to affirm, someone asked, will slides be available? Yes, they will be sent out. There's also about considering how do we define risk factors, and then also epigenetics. So I think we can add those to the list for defining those things. Sorry, I'm just going through the chat. So Jessica also shares, I think we need to have a theme or lens on how families are experts in their children and have the ability to be instrumental in healing. So Jessica, I think that also speaks to a little bit about what the work group was also talking about, of how do we ensure that we are defining or distinguishing different levels, so that there are opportunities or there are experiences, and I'm trying to think of what that there are intervention points that happen at the individual level, and that also happen at the organizational level, or at a larger program systems level. And so I think there was discussion with the work group of how do we define those different experience points and what they look like at the individual level, at the system level, at an organizational level. And I think also to your point of affirming the voice and choice that individuals, are experts in their own experiences, and that needs to be honored and taken into account. It's okay, put some definitions in the chat. And so again, we will save the chat, so all of these things will be saved. And thank everyone for the continued conversation around terms. Moving forward, we will keep it open, keep the work group open to continued feedback. Kelly, we might want to consider opening up our work group, some of our work group documents for folks to add definitions and notations for consideration. So there may be some additional material shared with commissioners to input information for the work group. So are there any other kind of questions or feedback, or especially for the commissioners that did attend the work group meeting? Is there anything else that you want to share or uplift for the commissioners about our time? Not seeing any. That's good. That means I covered everything that we discussed. But again, if anything comes up, if there's any information that you want to share, possible definitions, words to be defined, principles, assumptions, please share that with both Kelly and myself, and we can make sure that we share that with the work group for discussion. Glenn?
I think you're still on, right, Christina?
Yes. So transitioning us to what was on the agenda as the March 31st agency report. And thank you to our partners at the Maryland Department of Health who alerted us to this. In the legislation, it noted that on March 31st and following year, and each year following, agencies had to submit a report to the commission outlining their progress and compliance of their training and the folks that were designated to receive the training that's developed by the commission. Our assumption was that report would begin for March 31st of 2023 after the training had been developed by this commission. Unfortunately, as the bill was written, it did not include the year 2023. So for this year, there is a requirement of an agency report that has to be submitted to the commission by March 31st. So just as an FYI, we amended our timeline document that we had created, and so wanted to just open kind of the conversation about what should be included in that report for the aid of the commission. So this is our initial proposal about what agencies will need to include in that report to the commission. We took into account a lot of the discussions that we've had as a full commission and also some anticipated discussions from the work groups. What is the information that we would need from agencies to help complete the work task before us? So we will provide more detailed information and an official request to the agencies outlining the requirements of the report to the commission, but these are just some highlights of the type of information that we would be requesting. So first is specific definitions and terms. So we really want to have a better understanding of how our sister agencies are defining and utilizing terms, and then also noting where are those terms defined. Is it something that is defined by law, through regulation, or just in policy? And so we think that'll be really beneficial to not only the definitions and core values work group, but for the full commission to have a better understanding of those definitions so that we can do our best to create statewide definitions. So making sure that everyone is in agreement. When we say these terms, we are all in agreement in what that means and how we are using that. The next category is identifying current training curriculums and what is that training implementation. Again, we recognize that some agencies are already starting to do this work and already have existing trainings and curriculum created. And so again, we want to know as a commission what is already out there, what is already being used, and what is included in that. And so again, it's an opportunity that we can identify or what is recommended from this commission as the statewide training. We can also help support agencies that have existing training of saying, you know, you have 2 of the 3 components that are outlined and recommended by the commission. So that can help guide the agencies about where they need to fill some of those gaps. And also, we also don't want to have to recreate the wheel. So if there is really sound and robust training that's happening, we want to be able to utilize that and bring that up to the state level. And then finally is providing information on current trauma-informed initiatives and framework implementation efforts. So again, we know that there are agencies that are already starting to do this work. At a statewide level, there is a collective ACEs work group that is working with the National Governors Association, so that we want to honor and recognize that work is already happening, but this also satisfies one of the outcome, one of the goals of the legislation, that we have to do a scan and an accounting of what is currently in place. And so we think at a minimum, having the agencies share what is already happening will be of great benefit to the commission. So this is what we are proposing be included in the agency's report to the commission. We also want to highlight that this is a report to the commission. It's not a report to the General Assembly or to the governor, but we want to note that the information that is shared in this report will help inform and be included in the final report and recommendations. So just wanting to note who the final audience for this report is. So I'm just going to take a pause for a moment just to kind of get feedback from commissioners, and if there's anything you think needs to be added to help aid the commission in its work. And
What agencies are obligated to complete this report?
So I believe, and we can double check, but I believe at a minimum it's the agencies that are represented on the commission. But I know for the future, for all of the training requirements, we want all state agencies. And we can double check that and clarify that. I don't have the bill in front of me at this moment.
Okay, thank you.
So for our commissioners or even for our work group chairs, is there anything just in anticipation that you think would be helpful for agencies to include in this report?
When you say all state agencies, that include state institutions?
I'm not sure. I would have to go back to the bill and to clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Claudia.
Yeah, I do have the list in front of me, if I can bring it up here, of the other agencies, and also what's required in that. So it's all the agencies that are represented on the commission, and the Office of the Attorney General, the Department of Housing and Community Development, Department of Natural Resources, Department of Planning, Department of Public Works, Department of Transportation, and Department of Aging. Additionally, as far as that report is concerned that's due to the commission, there are some specifics about the state agency heads designating that are involved in the commission, and then those others. They have an obligation to designate 2 staff members on their staff to participate in a formal training each year, also to collaborate with the other agencies and start in work sessions and informal trainings that are organized by the health department, and to also serve as advisors to their agency director and staff to change, look at policies and practices and trauma-informed approaches within the agency, and make sure that they're aligning it with the work of the commission. So, just the fact, I think in the report, the agency should be reporting out what efforts are being made to designate those 2 staff people. And, I would think with the health department, anything that they are doing in relation to, and I think they are doing things like you mentioned, the ACEs work group, the cross-agency work group that's going on. And how they see those things fitting into the work of the commission. I think those are really important information that we should have as the commission moving forward. And also, it talks about a survey of let me get the exact terminology. assist in identifying state programs and services that impact children, youth, families, and older adults. And I think we've discussed this before. This is really broad. If it's just, you know, at this point, state programs and services that where they think trauma-informed efforts could be really helpful. I mean, I think that's almost all programs that impact children, youth, families, and older adults. But what they're looking at currently would be really helpful to us fulfilling that function of the commission. Mandate.
Thanks, Claudia. And to your last point, I think that was some of the intention for the second bullet, is to recognize what is already happening, and then also where are those areas where they think this fits. Again, we're going to have more in-depth language that would be provided to the agencies. Just wanted to provide what's here on the slide is kind of some overview of the category, the type of information that we would be asking. And I like to your point of agencies identifying what is that process, or how are they thinking about identifying those people that would receive training and serve that position as outlined in the law.
And I think understanding and what they need. I mean, what do they need to do that effectively? Because, you know, this is an unfunded mandate. If agency heads are appointing people that already have big jobs within their agencies, that's going to be that not much is going to be accomplished in an agency that does that. So, you know, do they have ideas of funding for it, funding for those positions? These are full-time positions that the statute creates, really. So I can't imagine doing that on top of somebody's full-time position. And there's some really folks that are designated members from their agencies serving on the commission that do exceptional work within their agencies, but to have that on top of their position would be an impossible task.
Thanks, Claudia. So I think to that point, have an opportunity for them about what is the implementation? Are there barriers or challenges to implementation? Maybe we can look at from the legislature kind of DLS language for state folks. You know, they always create the fiscal notes and always ask agencies, what is the impact? What needs to happen? What kind of resources do you need? So we can provide some more pointed questions to get some of that information. So I think not being able to see everyone, I did see someone in the chat said they concur, but generally, how do commissioners feel about adding that point that Claudia and I were just discussing about the identification and implementation of those designated folks from agencies to this report? Secretary Abed?
Yeah, I just, and I wanted to just comment on the notion of having, a sort of dedicated staff to this, and that there's a, sort of another side or another, sort of the other edge of that sword is that if you take that kind of approach, oftentimes what I've seen is agencies will sort of say, okay, well, you're the designated trauma-informed care person, and then everything relating to trauma-informed care just gets dumped on them. But what we really want to do is embed these practices in the everyday operations. And so you really do need to have those people with the big jobs understanding it, because this is, as I envision it, something that needs to be embedded into, for instance, for DJS, the training of our staff. So having the training unit involved, having our behavioral health team involved. And of course, we are an agency that does have trauma-informed care in our curriculum already. And certainly we want to make sure that we're doing things, according to best practices. But, there is a risk of, sort of pigeonholing this as an initiative versus embedding it into the everyday fabric of the agency. And I just wanted to put that out there.
Thank you, Secretary. There are some other hands, so I see. Oh, I'm sorry, all the hands just went away. Delisa.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to weigh in on what Claudia said because I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a really important way of looking at this, that if you're just adding it on top of what people already have to do, it's another thing people have to do. And so dedicated staff to me means that the resources are being dedicated to be able to do all that's required and put full attention on what's happening. And we want to create a culture of collaboration. So with all due respect, I think this idea that it's pigeonholed really is, if we create a culture of collaboration, knowing that this is not one or two people's job, it's going to take everyone wholeheartedly putting their all into it, creates a culture of collaboration. We need to create a culture of communication. We need to create a culture of teamwork so that this doesn't happen. But I think that the idea of what are the mechanisms to actually move things along, especially where funding is concerned, is a really important consideration.
Thank you so much, Delisa. I see Elizabeth.
So as one of the co-chairs of the implementation group, I think this is something that we'll really be tackling. So input or resources are going to be important. So if there is budgets, or finances available that we can add into our recommendations, that's going to be important to know. At the same time, within the council and the work we're doing here at the National Council, we recommend a core implementation team that really is cross-section across each department, that can do that collaboration work that Delisa is talking about, but can also represent kind of a cross-section to, that comment about it can't be just one person, but has to have leadership, has to have frontline, has to have those impacted by the services received at the table, looking at policies, procedures, practices, training, and kind of that ongoing oversight of, not just with one person or one level, but definitely across the board. And so if there's funding behind, or are we making recommendations for funding, or for the needs for funding, is one of my questions from the implementation group.
Thank you, Elizabeth. So with the funding, I think it's important to recognize, what needs to happen. I think also we just have to be mindful of the budgeting process and the role the agency, the role the agencies have in the creation of the budget. So I think that's definitely important, especially for the thinking about with the implementation. I think I see Michael.
I yield. Lisa, my subcommittee co-chair, said it so eloquently that I have nothing more to add. Elizabeth, we call her Lisa.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any other thoughts from commissioners? Oh, I think I see a hand. David.
Yes, well, I just want to second what Secretary Abed said. I don't know, because I missed the first part, what the desired outcome is. Being trauma informed doesn't seem like it's a desired outcome. How are we using this information in health promotion, prevention, harm reduction? If it's just to know and be trained about stuff, then you may not see much change. And that's why it has to be lived at every level, and that the data should guide practices. But being trauma informed is not an outcome in and of itself. So I think that's something we have to be clear about. what is the desired outcome for if everybody's trauma informed and we're using these practices.
Thank you, David. And that is why one of the things is we do have to create measures and how are we tracking this. So it's not only in the definition, but how are we showing that we are moving the needle and that we are creating a different system. So I think that's some of the questions that the measures outcome is going to need to be tackling as well. And so I see, and I believe Archie is the Baltimore gift economy.
Yes, I did put in the chat. We may be thinking about a development arm and doing some cross-sector development with the business sector so that we can start to bring in some of these funds from the private sector as well as some of the other groups that are out there. I know when I'm talking about trauma, folks are really interested in how to fund it. And there's money coming down, but it's still trickling out a little bit slow. So we need to start some capital development plans on getting this money to the places and the resources that it needs to be. As I see it, I might be short-sighted, but that's just something I was noticing as our conversation was moving forward.
Thank you so much, Archie. And I see Inga.
Yeah, I think the conversation about outcomes is critical because we cannot say we cannot call being trauma informed an outcome. It's a process, just like becoming culturally competent is a process. You never achieve it, and trauma research is changing, by the day. So I think it's critical that we, as the third co-chair of the TA and Implementation Committee, I think that's something that we'll have to emphasize, is that your work doesn't end just because we've got this accomplished and you've had this training. So.
Thank you, Inga. And I also just want to, clarify and be clear that it's the law that says that there are two designated folks. But I think also in this conversation here that there's a recognition that it's not just two people. It's not just two people. And so, but just for the as is designated in the law, that there has to be two state folks designated to work on this. But I think there's a general understanding that it's more than just two people that will be a part of this process and be impacted by all of this work. So I'm just going to pause for just a moment. I think in the chat there's just some affirming of Inga's comments around that it is that it's a process and that first it's building collective understanding to change systems. And so again, with this commission, it's starting to create that framework. It's beginning to identify those terms, to create the training and identifying the implementation and having that ongoing support and conversations with agencies. So I think it's the intention that this work continues. It's not just, after June 30th in the submission of the report that we're done, because then the training and the implementation continues to go forward, and the commission will continue to monitor and support that work. So thank you all. Again, just are there any other thoughts? Oh, Glenn?
I was just coming up, waiting for you to pass it over to you on next steps. You might as well just go to the agenda.
Glenn, your audio is a little muffled. I had a little trouble hearing you. I think you said I can go on to next steps. Okay. All right. So So just some of our next steps. Our next meeting is March 17th. For our commissioners, you should already have the calendar invite on your calendars. For members of the public, there will be the registration link on the commission's website on the office's webpage. So there you can sign up for the meeting. Also encouraging all of our work groups and our chairs to begin meeting and reaching out to your work group members to set your meeting schedule. Please let Kelly and I know how we can support you. If you need us to attend a meeting to provide additional feedback or support or answer questions, we are happy to do that to support you in doing your work. Also, we will provide follow-up information and more detailed information to agencies as they begin to prepare their reporting submissions. And so we will also, once those reports are in, we will share that information back out to the full commission and to the work groups for using that information to continue to guide and support their work.
I don't know if my mic is working now.
It's a little fuzzy, so I can kind of finish us out. So again, please do not hesitate to reach out to Kelly and myself as we are the commission staff contacts. Also, additional information about the commission, the meetings, access to meeting documents are all available on the Governor's Office of Crime Prevention, Youth and Victim Services website under the commissions. And always continue to connect with us and share this information with others. We want to bring everyone who is passionate about this work into this work and creating a safer Maryland. So thank you all so much for your time, and we look forward to continuing to work with you.
Thank you.
Kelly, I think we're good to stop the recording. And do you need me to save